Okay, this is a public hearing by the Rutland Planning Board for articles to be placed on the fall town meeting warrant. I'd just like to note that this meeting is being recorded for later use for broadcast on cable television. I'm going to open the hearing just by partially reading the legal notice for this, as the whole thing is very complicated. But anyway, it says the Town of Rutland, Massachusetts Planning Board will hold a public hearing pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, on October 23rd, 2018, at 7 o'clock in the Rutland Free Public Library, Large Meeting Room, 280 Main Street. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide interested parties with an opportunity to comment on proposed changes to the Town of Rutland zoning bylaws as listed below. I'm not going to read all of the rest of this. It's going to be just kind of time-consuming. Just a little bit in the way of explanation. There are going to be a number of articles on the fall town meeting warrant regarding recreational marijuana usage and the construction and operation of what I call licensed marijuana establishments, or LMEs as we call them. Kind of a summary of the different, at least possible articles, is over there on the table for anyone who would like to take a look at them. There is also, and I don't know, let me say, I got to try to kind of keep this straight. There are a number of articles, one of which, or more, would actually permit LMEs in certain zoning districts in the town. Is a, I believe, 7-page document. Okay, and this is probably what we are most interested in hearing comments on. It's a very, very complete document. It has gone through at least a preliminary legal review after it was written by the bylaw subcommittee. There are other articles that are going to be on the warrant, or probably going to be on the warrant, which will not be anywhere near as complicated because they likely simply provide for a prohibition of any LME operations in town. I guess the only other comment that I would want to make on this is that depending on the vote on each of these articles, it is very, very possible that some articles will actually have a motion to take no action, because in some cases, one article actually contradicts the other. If one article passes and the next article contradicts it, you can't have that. Okay, it just, it doesn't make any sense. It's not even legal. So the action of the town meeting is probably going to be complicated as well. Let me see. In general, I'm just trying to keep this as simple as I can, and because I do want more to hear from you people rather than you hear from us. And let me just run these down in as clear as language as I can put this in. The first article that is on this handout, okay, would be a zoning bylaw that prohibits all LMEs. In other words, no licensed marijuana establishment would be allowed anywhere in town. That is a zoning bylaw. It will require a 2/3 majority vote. Just to give you a little bit of history, there was a vote at the last election, I believe it was, regarding residents' preference, and by a very, very narrow margin, the results of that came out negative by only a couple of percentage points. So it kind of appears, at least from that there's a good chance the townspeople are very, very evenly divided. Making a two-thirds majority vote really in doubt at the very, very least. Okay. The second article would be, again, a zoning article that would allow certain marijuana establishments in certain zones in town. Let me see, third one. Let me just make sure I get this correct. A third one
Some more pain.
would allow for LMEs other than retail sales. There are several classes, and actually, if you look at the chart that is over there on the side, the different classes of marijuana establishments are listed there. And they go all the way from cultivation to processing to research to testing and some other things of that nature. So the reason for doing those two is that we feel that likely, if there is objection, the strongest objection would probably be to having a retail sales establishment in town. So that's why we're offering those two. Once again, those other two are zoning bylaws. They require a two-thirds majority in order to pass. Then we also have an article to adopt, and this is not a zoning article, and by the way, I should have mentioned this, some of these articles that are part of the package are not zoning, they are general bylaws. General bylaws require only a majority vote to pass at town meeting. One of the general bylaw articles would be to see if the town will accept a section of Mass General laws to allow the town to collect a 3% sales tax on retail marijuana sales. And then there would also be an article that is a general bylaw prohibiting all LMEs. The reasoning, unless someone else on the board here feels that it's really otherwise, is that where there is a very possible scenario of none of the zoning bylaws achieving a two-thirds majority, a general bylaw only has to receive a 50% majority. The other reason I'm going to say that this one was placed on there is if the town does not act on something, does not pass something here, we have a moratorium on marijuana establishments that expires on December 31st. If that expires on December 31st and the town has not passed any other bylaws, then the only constraints on marijuana establishments are according to state law. We would basically have no control over zoning districts where they could be placed or anything else. So that it's kind of a last-ditch thing if nothing else works kind of thing. What else? There was something else in the general bylaw that was going to be on here that I don't think we have here. Or was it?
I just see 5.
Yeah, I thought there'd be a 6 of.
No, I'm pretty sure, okay, well, public consumption, we don't know. Okay,
Yeah,
there is the possibility, by the way, these are our proposals. The final warrant is set by the Board of Selectmen, not by us and not by this public hearing. Okay, so it is, I guess, entirely possible that the Selectmen may decide that one or more of these is not appropriate to go on the warrant. I'm hoping not. There has been some talk about a public consumption bylaw. We really just don't even know where that exactly is at. That would be a general bylaw, not a zoning bylaw. But I just thought I'd bring it up. There has been some discussion. Okay, I don't know, just,
Laura's gonna,
I just got a question.
Mhm.
Sorry, were these suggestions made by the bylaw subcommittee or the planning board? These recommendations?
okay, these were formulated by the bylaw subcommittee and forwarded to the planning board and recommended by the planning board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I guess first of all, any comments from, I would like to think I've covered most everything, but any of the
Well done.
members of the board?
No.
in
No.
terms of the articles.
Okay. Okay, then, please, people.
I'm, through the chair, I'm going to step aside due to a possible conflict of interest.
Did you have anything that you were going to present?
No, I didn't prepare anything that I was gonna present, I just figured I'd be here to answer
Okay.
questions if need
Okay,
be.
yeah, okay, and excuse me, Ron, just very, very quickly, this is Ron Barron from CMRPC,
Hi, everyone.
and it was basically their sample draft that we kind of started this from. It's gone through,
A lot of revisions.
oh boy, it has gone through so much. We, even right up to last week,
Right,
we had, what, 3 meetings last week?
including Saturday
You know,
night.
Yeah, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday night, to try to kind of finalize this thing. Okay, some hands, at least, yes, yes. Oh, by the way,
Nick Monaco, Police Chief. I'm just looking for clarification on the licensed retail establishments.
Mm-hmm.
Is that for a dedicated retail establishment, marijuana only, or is that for a retail establishment such as a convenience store to be licensed to start selling?
retail marijuana only.
Only dedicated marijuana?
Dedicated, yeah, exactly. With quite strict regulations from the state around, what that can look like, when it can function, it's highly regulated.
Thank you.
Yes,
Carol Martens, Pleasantdale Road. Has there been any of the studies when you guys have been doing, or who's ever been doing this, of what the impact on our town services, our police, our fire, our roads, people coming into town, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't believe we've really
No,
done anything.
we have not, as the board, done any of those impact studies. There is in the medical, in the retail establishment, there's, and I don't quote me, but I think it's only the retail, there's an agreement that can be made between the town and the retailer as to what the impacts are suggested to be on the town, and they can be reimbursed, for 3 years, I believe it is.
Add something to that? I just wanted to add, one of the challenges that we found is that because of the way the Massachusetts law has been written, it's not easy to go look at other states where this has been implemented and try to draw any kind of parallels. So we have tried to look at it, but we haven't really found too many meaningful parallels between them because Massachusetts is taking a very radically different approach to it than Colorado or Oregon or any of the states did. And as far as the impacts to it, all of the businesses that would come in, they can get up to 3% of everything that they sell, can go back to the town to help mitigate the costs that you would incur as part of the impacts to any kind of new development. But as far as being able to assess what those may be, we're still in sort of a guessing period right now because we haven't actually seen any of it implemented. So.
Yes.
Leah Waitman, 208 East County Road. I have a question about use. I think the bylaw talks about the zoning districts, not for a zoning bylaw, but the areas in which retail establishments could potentially be set up or anything. Can you talk a little bit more about those zoning districts? I know with the schools, kind of the business district is close to the schools. How is it looking from a planning board perspective, I guess?
Okay, at risk of boring a lot of people, The locations where different things would be allowed, if the version of the bylaw that does allow LMEs is adopted, there's a chart of what we have, at least at this point, as suggestions where they might be held, and I think I'm going to read them. I hate to just read to people, but I think I'm going to. And I'm going to also particularly, Doug, point to you on this one. Okay, because I would hope you would at least comment.
I was actually waiting and I was gonna.
Okay, anyway, it starts with, these are the various titles. First one is a craft marijuana cooperative. We are saying if those are allowed, they will be allowed in the light industrial and light industrial/office zones. There are several light industrial zones around town. One of them, just plain light industrial, is only one. That is a piece of town-owned property on Route 68 near the Holden line, basically in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Light industrial office, there are a couple of small places, and there's one fairly large place in North Rutland, almost up near the Hubbardston line, has very, very limited access. And then, I don't know, a couple of others. There's over on Intervale Road, Kappa Corporation, I think, is industrial.
The biggest one's on 68 up at Hubbardston.
Yeah, that's by far the biggest one. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of the light industrial. The next classification would be a marijuana cultivator. That means a person that actually grows it. And once again, that it would be allowed in the light industrial and light industrial zones, or office zones only. Marijuana product manufacturer, same thing, light industrial or light industrial office. Marijuana retailer, Town Center 2 District and Village Center District. Okay, the Town Center 2 District is, and I can't give you actually a number of feet, but it's well outside of the center of town going down Maple Ave. I believe Town Center 2 starts, without the map.
Over by
I'm
the
afraid I-
cemetery and goes out from there? Is it past the cemetery?
On
and goes-
Maple Ave?
Yeah, no, on 122A.
We're used to being in our
122A.
office where the maps are on the
Yeah,
wall and we
right,
can point to
right,
them.
Somewhere in the vicinity of the Rutland Heights Hospital property, maybe a little bit closer to town than that, and down a portion of Maple Ave on both sides.
Where was the other one?
And the Town Center 2 District also on 122A starts, I believe, at about Glenwood Road, going towards Holden, for a
By
distance.
Davis property?
I believe there is almost nothing over by Davis. It does, no, that's Town Center 1, it goes down
Anyway,
Palmagussit. That's only Town Center 1.
the summary of it is that Anita's got maps for us.
I was gonna just do that, Anita, so I get on the web and then, you got it, great. Oh, let me read.
The summary of it is, the summary of it is that there's, it's well within the 500 feet, what's
Yes.
the word I want? The
Away
500
from.
feet limit from this, for the school
Town Center
district.
2 is from Glenwood Road down to, on the other side of Juniper Lane on 122A going towards Holden. There is no Town Center 2 on Main Street heading west. The Town Center 2 is Palmagussit, out to just up to Millbrook Street on Palmagussit, and then on Maple Ave, it starts almost at the entrance of the Rutland Heights District and goes down to the
Kenwood Road, I think.
Kenwood, yeah, goes down to Kenwood on both sides. That's the Town Center 2.
And the village center districts, there are two. One of them is at Four Corners, and it goes several hundred feet either side of the intersection of Pleasantdale and
Yeah, it's,
122. Okay,
here it is right here.
and the other one is at North Rutland,
Which is
from...
literally from
about-
River Road to the line.
Yeah, River Road to the Hubbardston line.
And
Yep.
as a follow-up, I think, Marilyn, you had said that it's 500 feet from the schools. Is that the minimum distance? Is that?
Yeah, that is specifically written into the marijuana bylaw
Right.
that we're proposing.
The state level, yes?
That is the state limit.
Yeah, yeah, but we've also included it in ours.
And it actually goes from lot line to lot line.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so that's marijuana retailer. Marijuana independent testing laboratory, light industrial office, Heights Plan Development District, and Village Center District. Marijuana micro business is the next clarification, light industrial office, and Village Center District. Marijuana research facility, light industrial office, Heights Plan Development District, and marijuana transporter, light industrial office. So that's a lot to swallow all at once, but anyway, you can get a copy over there if you need to review it.
The upshot of that is actually that there are 8 categories of licenses that are available. And they are, depending on what they are, they're further apart from the center or closer to the center.
So, another thing is, in the article, it does allow LMEs. We have limited to no more than 5 LMEs in town at any one time. And that's total through all of these classifications. Not 5 of each, 5 total.
And is that 5 total written into one of the bylaws that we will be voting on, or is
Yes.
that a mass general?
No,
No,
that's in the one that we will be
that's our-
voting on.
Ours.
What's a micro business?
I can feel that as
Yeah.
well. Micro business is one of the licenses you can get. It allows you to grow, I believe it's the first tier, so I think up to 5,000 square feet of total canopy is how they refer to it. And the canopy basically is the total square footage that your growing plants occupy. So you can get up to 5,000 square feet. You can also have a manufacturing business in there, and you don't have to get a separate license. And the only other provision is it allows you to purchase up to 20, I think it's 2,000 pounds, not 20,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't remember. It allows you to purchase a certain quantity of marijuana in wholesale to process. The thought being that you can grow a certain amount, you can only get so many crops out of it, but if you want to keep your business going, you can buy it on the wholesale market and still produce. And the idea is really for it to be like sort of the craft beer of the marijuana industry. So, but it's a very small, self-contained operation is the idea.
But that's not sales.
That's not retail, no. That's only wholesale. They can only sell to other businesses.
Okay. Thank you.
And actually, I think Bonnie should be sitting up here because she was instrumental in working on the subcommittee to write this.
Mike, just as well.
I'm Doug Briggs from the RDIC. And one of the concerns I have is that you have the HPDD, which is in essence Rutland Heights. And I understand the governance, but I think we need to have something in here that also makes everybody aware of the fact that there's that other step. Because you have the HPDD review that is in essence the ZBA that is done on that site and that site alone. So when you're talking about site plan approval, all right, I just think you need to have in there, you need a site plan approved by the SPGA and / the HPDD.
Okay, where did we put that in
It's
there?
on page 5.
Well, I think Norm, there was the provision that that allowed the planning board to delegate authority to another temporary or another board, on page 1, under subsection 2. I believe that sounds like this is the scenario that you guys had in mind. I'm not 100%.
Well, it's not that they're giving it to us, that is our right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's our property, and we are the governing board
Okay.
for that property.
Well, but I'm saying for otherwise there would be a conflict if they didn't have it listed, that if they listed themselves as the only special permit granting authority, and so there's a provision to have some other authority be able to do
Yeah.
it.
First of all, special permits are required for all of them, not just site plan. And the special permit granting authority, well, let me just read the whole thing. Special permit granting authority for purposes of this article shall be one of the following. The planning board, when the planning board is the authority for the zoning district in which the LME intends to operate. Or number 2, a joint temporary body consisting of the planning board and the authority for the zoning district in which the LME intends to operate. So in case of Rutland Heights, it would be a joint review and application process.
Okay, if you think that covers it. It's not really, but because it's not joint, because the HPDD is an independent evaluation source,
Right.
of which there is no
Yeah.
planning board on it, so.
So would the feelings of the town people have any sway with the HPPD?
As much as it would with the planning board. But again, I just,
Yeah, okay.
I don't know that it's a big deal, but
Yeah.
I just didn't know if there should be that inference made that in certain areas, there is an additional requirement that's necessary.
I don't know, I personally, I feel that kind of covers it. That-
Okay.
It pretty much has to get by both.
So if the HPD or the Rutland Heights denies and we say yes, because it's joint, it's denied.
Yes.
It's done, yep.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, I guess, and, okay. Go ahead.
The districts that you're talking about, that with the light industrial that you went through, I don't know if I can request this, maybe this is something that will go back to the select board, but in order for the townspeople to make a better educated decision, not just on all the things that can happen, but where it can happen, because that can impact differently, not just schools, a lot of other impacts. If that could be published, perhaps by a map or two in the newspaper for the week or two or both before town meeting, that could have some impacts.
Through the chair, I think that map, as
Map
Anita
of-
shows me, is on the
of
Rutland,
zones
is on the
or-
Rutland website. If I'm not mistaken, Anita,
Yeah.
it's on our website.
It's on the town website.
And then maybe put that into the newspaper too then, that there is, don't forget, look, so people don't think
That
of
might take
that.
funding though, so it would be if the planning board has the funds to do something.
To put an ad in the newspaper or a story. I mean, I'm sure we have a newspaper person here tonight.
We do.
And the other question was, do you guys have any sense of applicants, what kind of interest there is in people wanting to do the different parts of this?
The only interest that I am aware of is that we have had one person interested in becoming a cultivator. And, you know, I don't even know whether first interest would be necessarily expressed to selectmen, to planning board, to town administrator, or who, but I have heard of nothing other than that.
The RDIC has been approached by a company that is interested in working in this arena.
Is this the same one I'm thinking of?
I would think so, yes.
Okay. So it does not, well, let me just say, it doesn't sound like people are thinking that we are Charlton. And that everybody in the world wants to come here. And, you know, among other things, I don't want to drag this out, but I'm still hunting for more questions. Most of this marijuana, particularly cultivation, and this, I've received a huge education in the past 6 or 7 months. Most marijuana cultivation is not done in open fields. Okay, it's done inside enclosed buildings under very, very controlled conditions. So, and very, very particularly, what I think you probably find is the towns around here that may have large either warehouses or empty factory buildings or something like that are the ones that are going to be targeted a whole lot more for these marijuana facilities. And that's just a sense I have. I can't back that up with any facts necessarily.
No, I've actually read that in the newspapers, that that's one of the criterias of people who are looking, companies that are looking for our locations to build. And just kind of a point of interest, I do happen to have, as I've been carrying around with me, it seems for quite a couple of months now, these are the Massachusetts regulations which cover just about anything anybody can think of. I'm sure some other people can think of something else, but they're very comprehensive and they're very specific as to what kinds of licenses can do what and what kind of security systems are needed.
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry. Brenda Savoy, Pleasantdale Road. And first I want to say thank you very much to the planning board for such a comprehensive report. All of the work that you did in this is great. And I also wanted to ask you, does this prohibit any type of establishment in a residential neighborhood? Anything?
The town center and village center districts are mixed-use districts. So, you technically could say that those are residential, because residential development is allowed. But in there is no reference to anything allowed in the R40 or R60 residence zoning districts. There's no place for that. Yes.
Jay Gully, Prospect Street. I'm curious if there's been any studies done as far as the economic impact some of these facilities can provide for our town. I understand that there's 3%, but that's a sales tax. Did I understand that correctly? The 3% is a sales tax?
No, the impact fee is on gross revenue, so it's basically a revenue sharing scheme. There is an additional, if you allow retail, there is the option to have, and that's one of the articles on here, to have an optional 3% tax on direct sales. But the 3% impact fee is something that's negotiated with all of them, and that's off gross sales. So, gross revenue.
Let's face it, we could use some tax revenue in this town. And I think that would certainly help.
And I guess that, two things. I've heard, some pretty astounding numbers, like, again, I'll have to reference Charlton and so forth, but I have also heard that there's getting to be some pushback on some of these, the town's trying to negotiate agreements in that they have to do a much better job of justifying, what the monies are going to be used for, and that they relate directly to the marijuana establishments. In other words, it isn't going to be just a gift.
Follow.
Okay.
The tax money?
No, not the tax money. The
impact fee.
The impact fee. But what happened initially is that some of the companies and the towns were so anxious to get together that the state has decided that the impact fees that they had agreed to were quite outrageous and wanted them to renegotiate them and bring them down to what was more reasonable in the eyes of the state.
Yeah, and those impact fees are not forever, I don't believe.
Right, is it 3 years?
No, it's up to 5 years.
Up to 5 years on the impact fees.
Yeah, and it's unclear whether or not those host agreements can be renegotiated after the 5-year period and whether or not the impact fees can continue after that. The tax on retail is permanent. There's no sunset clause on the tax. It would seem to me that being able to renegotiate the impact fees would make sense because the impacts don't stop after a certain amount of time, but they do have to be tied to specific things, such as, the impacts onto the road or increased police presence. And some people, we've even seen people try work out like drug education, things like that are impacts that they're able to assess. The problem that they've been seeing with the first wave of them is that a lot of the towns have been asking for really, really heavy things, huge amounts of money up front, mandatory volunteer donations, like really kind of strange things that have been kind of making it difficult for smaller operators to get into the market, because it's really only the people with really deep pockets who have been able to afford to get these kind of agreements. So they've been cracking down on it, or they've been talking about cracking down on it in that regard. So far, though, I think the commission has resisted enforcing it, so it's hard to tell where they're going to land on it.
It's kind of an unknown at this point.
Yeah.
That's, you can't necessarily count on it.
So when we talk about impact fees and we talk about taxes, if there was no impact fee, and it sounds like after the 5 years that might be a toughie, but it's still going to have impacts. But if there was no impact fee, the taxes would essentially take care of or would go towards the impact. The police and the street sweeping and the traffic and...
Well, I believe the receipts from any sales tax would simply go into the general fund.
Right, but taxes from other, other
And,
taxes.
what they end up being used for, that's, well,
I know
that will depend on you, the voters, when you go to town meeting and you approve a budget.
But there's,
Liquor stores in town have, at least in our neighborhood, have a big impact. So then you start adding to these things and, I just want to make sure that, if there's an impact fee, that all of a sudden it's gone in 5 years, but we're still paying for an extra police car or an ambulance or God only knows what. It's a little scary to look forward.
And it's unclear.
Yeah.
We just don't know that.
A lot more studies need to be done, I think, and that's money.
That's something that's going to come down from the state level, I would assume.
And just to be clear, just so everybody knows, that the tax is only on retail. So if you don't have retail in town, you don't allow it, that tax is off the table. The only thing you have to work with is the impact fees, because you don't get to tax wholesale unless you have a revenue sharing agreement as part of a community host agreement, and that's the impact fee that we're talking about.
Anyone else? Anything? Yes.
Jeff Stillings, Lord Lane. In your analysis, did you guys factor in the obvious conflict with the federal statutes?
No.
So the state to go by, correct?
Mhm.
We just have the state.
Yeah, this is,
State law to go by.
I am assuming that, you're simply talking about the federal stand that, marijuana use, sales, or whatever is simply illegal.
Well, it's still a scheduled drug, right?
Yeah, it's a scheduled
I'm not
drug.
making an application
Yeah.
either way.
And-
But the supremacy clause of the Constitution says that in conflicting matters of federal versus state, federal supersedes, right?
Mhm.
So it's
We-
So it's a legal type question I'm asking is what's the legal sufficiency of a town bylaw superseding Title 21 of the United States Code?
None, absolutely none. There's no protection. If the federal government decides it wants to come in and crack down on any state that has legal recreational marijuana, they absolutely can, and there's really nothing you can do to stop them. Now, could the states try to sue in the Supreme Court, and maybe there's some avenue there, but the supremacy clause obviously stands. So the way the state has dealt with it is that it has prohibited any attempts to transport over state lines on the legal grounds that provided they're not engaging in interstate transit, interstate commerce, then the supremacy clause doesn't apply, because There is one view that the Constitution only really grants Congress the right to govern interstate commerce and not in-state commerce. But that obviously hasn't been tested because the federal government hasn't come in and tried to stop any state yet.
So thinking and speaking solely as a representative of the town, what protection does the town have from a federal-wise dragnet linking you to some conspiracy to cultivate marijuana? You're just taking the chance, or the assumption that down the road, they're not gonna say, it's time to enforce this. I don't know, what liability does the town have in involving itself in such
CMR, so we're
matters?
following state regulations, correct? So
We're following state regulations. We see, they would have to come down on the state rather than the town.
Presumably, I mean, I have heard someone bring up the question, could the government look at tax revenue generated as laundering drug money? I don't know. They've never tried, and that's not something that I have the expertise to be able to answer, unfortunately.
You don't want to be the test case.
Well, I mean, no. I mean, a town the size of Rutland is probably not going to be the test case. If anybody's going to be the test case, it'll probably be Boston or somebody that's going to make a bigger splash. But you're absolutely right. There is, when it comes to the federal government, that is something that every town has to be concerned with because it is still illegal. And the only reason we don't know that is because they haven't done it yet. There's been many states that have made it legal and they just haven't cracked down. They've threatened to, but they haven't done it yet. So, I mean, if they suddenly decide to do it, we don't know what's going to happen because they haven't tried.
So we're just taking a chance, as a collective body, we're choosing to ignore that aspect of the federal law with the chance that, or the assumption that we'll probably be okay.
In that respect, I'd have to say yes. As our,
Colorado, Oregon.
and who knows how many other towns in Massachusetts.
Could that also be applied to some of the other, so we got presented with stormwater regulations from the EPA, which is going to burden the town $180,000 a year, which we don't know where that's going to come from. Is that a regulation that we could bylaw out of?
I wouldn't try it.
And ignore it?
Knowing the EPA is probably a little bit different.
Yeah, I think the EPA has a different view of state sovereignty than some of the other departments in the federal government.
Anyone else?
Yeah, some good stuff here. So just wondering a little bit, doesn't talk like a lot of detail. And I know you have this stuff up there, but when you put this together, we talked about this like a different tier thing for that micro business.
The whole draft is over there on the
Okay.
table as well. Yeah.
But so in here, do you folks specifically say, hey, we're only gonna allow up for tier 3 in Rutland if we decide to let this happen at all? Because what happened in Charlton, following the paper a little bit, it's like all of a sudden reading, it's like, wow, this would have been the largest facility in the nation for a grow cultivation place. I'm like, they got greedy. Why did they do that? That's a huge operation. So I think they got greedy doing that. So I think, the language, and again, I didn't, read it all through, but if Rutland says, hey, first of all, I don't think we need retail dispensary in Rutland. I think that's why we need that. Again, I know you have to put this down somewhere. Consumption, public consumption, you can't drink alcohol in public. Why in the world would you think someone could smoke marijuana in public? So whatever, I think just if you go along the same lines of,
There's a lot more to that question than that.
Yep, okay. But the whole tier thing is kind of like, hey, you gotta put a limit in here. You can't say, yeah, we're gonna let this, we're gonna let some out-of-state possible, company come in and try to put a giant facility in. People are gonna be like, yeah, we don't want another Charlton. No, we don't want, I don't know what's going on. I read that a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what they've done since then, because people are, I can believe why they're concerned. It's like, yeah, we don't want a huge facility in our town like that. But, so, are you folks trying to put in, is it in here already? Yeah, we're gonna limit that size of someone that entity wants to come into town. We're not gonna let them apply for this permit, because people, when you go to vote on this stuff, people are gonna be like, well, hey, where's the limits here? How big can they go? You know, do we need, you know, the recreational thing, you know, whatever, cultivation, maybe it's just say, hey, we're gonna be medicinal only. You know, no dispensaries, no retail, we're gonna have facilities that'll be on an area of land that's bigger than anything that anyone's neighbor to look over and go, wow, look at over there, that's a cultivation facility. Maybe you should, you know, and again, you know, I know it's not an agricultural crop, it's not, you know, part of 61A,
Right.
but there are people in town with enough land where you could put a facility in on their property, and you wouldn't even see it from the road. The neighbor's not gonna see it. So, you know, this zoning stuff is a little weird, but just going with these, you know, industrial stuff, and it's like, you know, this guy didn't seem like he wanted his backyard up at the Heights, so, you know, you're kind of like, you know, the Heights might not be a bad place, but the school isn't that far from the Heights either, so, you know, again, cultivation is all indoors, there's nothing, they're not growing anything outside.
Yeah, well,
So it's gonna be behind closed doors, no one sees anything, and, you know, so the industrial, you know, I think of properties that aren't zoned, what you're talking about, and makes me go, gee, you know, what if I'm not industrial zoned and I have enough property to put a facility in that no one will even see,
It's not allowed right now.
you know? So and again, I know this is coming up on, you know, voting pretty quick, so how much time is there to go over this stuff for you folks? Is this pretty much what you folks are gonna bring to the town meeting, or what?
we're very, very close to exactly
Really?
that. We're pretty much just out of
So is I
time.
right with there's no limitations on the tier, like,
As far
if
as
people
tiers.
get together and say, hey, we want to see this happen? Now, you could have a company like that trying to get into Charlton, you could have those people come up and say, yeah, hey, we want to do this, but I think the town would be smart to say, we don't want this giant, I forget, it was a, I don't know, it was a 100,000 square foot facility, or, it was huge, it was a big building. And I think the town should, you know, if you're gonna try to do something, you know, legit, it's like cap it and say, yeah, we don't want this giant, we could, you know, I know there's like 3 or 4 tiers.
Oh, there's 11 tiers.
Are there, to the
Yeah, there's
counties?
11 tiers. It's pretty absurd.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right, you don't wanna have this, the 11th tier was, we have this insane facility, yeah? So if people might feel better if they go, oh, it'll be capped at this. There's never gonna be one building bigger than this for someone to do cultivate.
I don't believe we discussed limiting
No, I
by
don't think
tiers
that we
to
did.
speak of, and I guess a sort of, I'd say a problem, this would be personally, that I have, is that for something like that, you're really picking a very, very arbitrary number. And, you know, when you start just pulling numbers out of the air,
On the tiers, no, they're very specific.
no,
No.
but we would have to pull a number out of the air as to what to allow and what not to allow.
Yeah, well, I think common sense plays a little bit. Like I said, Charlton they try to pull off,
Yeah.
they went for the goal, and it's like, they got greedy, and it's like, now I can see why the townspeople are going, you know, that's huge, it's the biggest one in the country, you kidding me? I think that was stupid.
It was a complex, it is in Charlton, it's a very complex issue too, because it wasn't all a grow facility, it included research facilities and, you know, a lot of other aspects built into that.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things, and I haven't really looked at this, but in Rutland, I think we're somewhat limited by the acreage of our industrial zones already. They're not
That's
very
why I
large.
say, you know, the industrial part is taking some players out of the game. We can't, you know, it's like if someone's got some acreage,
But
it's not industrial
but
zone.
it can't be in the RD and R60, which is a big percentage of the town. You know, these industrial zones that are spoken about in the drafts here is, you know, are relatively small pieces of property which are gonna have a limit on how big of a facility can be put onto it, you know. It's gonna be self-limited by the zones. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, but so 61A is not gonna be able to participate, it's safe to say. You don't want-
Unless it's in one of those designated.
Yeah, and then, you know, something, you know, and we all know that, you know, we're trying to improve the schools, you know, want to choose a school district, you know, but we're, you know, and it takes time, it's all good, but, you know, the revenue is there for some of these places, And, you know, if you're gonna put like a little micro business in, how much money are you gonna, how much revenue are you gonna get out of it? Probably not a lot.
One
So
of the-
To get involved with it all makes you go, why bother? It's
One
it's
of-
chump change.
one of
In the
the-
end, so it's like, why get to do a micro industrial thing?
One of the things that the state felt, the commissioners felt very strongly about was developing a plan that would allow multiple, the small businessman, in other words, to, to be able to come in and, develop something in this industry rather than having it being limited to, as you say, the Charlton-type grower. So that's the scheme of things with the micro
Well, isn't a farmer a
businesses.
small businessman?
Pardon me?
Isn't a farmer a small businessman?
Just very simply, recreational marijuana cultivation is not agricultural.
No, that
Let's classify.
61A property would have to come out of 61A, I understand that. It's like if you
You know,
put a solar
you-
farm in, that has to come out
But
of
it would still
61A.
have to be in an industrial zone, even for
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm
60.
talking about, we keep going back to industrial zone, where if someone has agricultural property, if you want to put a solar farm, then you would have to take it out of 61A, pay your back taxes to the town,
Correct.
and you could put in a solar farm. So now, why couldn't that same place say, hey, why can't I put in a cultivation facility?
Because it would,
Because the town said no.
the town says no, because it's not in the right, it would have to
So-
be in the industrial zone,
Right, I
whereas
understand.
the
but I'm
solar
just trying to
farms
clarify,
don't.
Like, you was something that's out of sight, out of mind, you think the townspeople might be more receptive to that and say, "Yeah, this place is gonna go in a place where no one's, you're gonna have to drive down this road, go up this road, to even look at this building, if you care.
So just,
If you even care about it. But instead, you wanna put it in an industrial zone area where someone's definitely gonna see it.
Jeff?
Thank you, sir. Question probably for Ron. Do you know, for the licensee holders, are the background checks involved in the state process?
yes, there are. There's a thorough background check process that goes in for all applicants. They have, some of the pieces that the state requires as part of the application are reflected in the bylaw. Mostly in terms of it's written so that the town can get copies of all this material and they can have it on file, but there's a thorough background check process that goes into it. The only people that, there is a class of people who do have criminal backgrounds who can get licenses, but it's a very narrow, tailored group of people who are non-violent criminals who have been, they haven't actually been involved in drug dealing, but they've been arrested maybe for drug possession or something like that, they call them this empowerment category. I don't believe there would be anybody that would qualify for that in this area, but it's mostly to try to help make sure that people who have nonviolent records are not completely cut out of this particular potential business opportunity.
Thanks, Ron.
And to say something really quick, if I can, about the tier option. There's and the rural placing it in rural zones. First with the tiers, so far I haven't seen any towns that have taken that approach to try to limit it by tier. Part of the concern is that if you limit it to the tier, the state can always change the tier, and you don't really have any way of controlling for it because it's under the regulation and it's nothing you can really fix. And then the second thing is that nobody really knows yet, like, what these buildings look like. Like, the Charlton example is a huge, horrifying example, but they actually didn't have a very high tier. They didn't even have their full tier 1,100 square feet of grow space. What they had done is they had gotten a giant footprint building that they were going to have a little bit of cultivation for themselves and then manufacturing, and then they were going to sublease out the rest of the land to other licensees. So it was a very complicated scheme that nobody saw coming. So it's hard to come to that, and I think that's one of the reasons why most towns don't take that approach of putting a cap on it.
But the town could always put in a square footage maximum. And instead of playing this tier game and going, hey, what if the CCC changes it? It's like,
a point I'd like to make is that the Charlton case of subletting is not allowed in this bylaw. One site, one license, one licensee. So this whole large complex, we're gonna bring in lots of businesses into this one space, it cannot happen with this bylaw if it's passed. I'm not saying it restricts. A tier 11 is a tier 11. The size of that building would be the size of that building, but it does limit the ability of too many places to be co-located.
Appreciate it.
Hi, Brian Fleckenstein, Eastern Lane. I thought you said there were going to be, of all different types of LMEs, the town would permit up to 5 licenses, is that right?
Yes,
So
maximum 5.
how is that determination made, so if 5 retail shops want to open up?
Then the 5
So
are
that,
used
is
up.
it first come, first serve? Is that how the licenses work then?
And in fact, the norm properly, I'm sorry, it wasn't recognized. There are 5 LMEs total, but the number of retail establishments is fixed as 20% of the number of liquor establishments for off-site consumption. So the package store down here is one, the one at Four Corners is another. We have fewer than 5, so we would have no more than 1 with the current map. Retail, leaving 4 for others.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just one last thought is, back to the agricultural end of things. I know it's not agricultural, but as the town grows, it's been doing quite well. A lot of residential, a lot of building, it's all good. People like coming to Rutland, it's a good town. But I think we've learned over the last couple of decades that the revenue from our taxes isn't really enough to support the town. I mean, our highway department, them guys are out straight there, I don't need to tell you anything about what's going on with the money. So if you look at someone in town that might have land, and they go, geez, doing anything in the world of cannabis ain't gonna happen in Rutland. What happens eventually? What happens, the builder's gonna knock on your door and say, hey, what are you guys doing? It's like, well, we can barely pay our taxes. And they go, well, this is what we can do. And next thing you know, you've got, 30 more houses in town going in. And you're going, this is gonna cost us money now. You're not gonna make any money on the revenue and taxes. We all know it. The taxes are gonna keep going up and up and up. There's nothing else we can do. Again, if we want good schools, so people even want to come to Rutland, I think that's why people move here. We have good schools, we have a good reputation, we have, it's all good, the infrastructure's good. But how long can the taxes from residents pay for? We don't have any, commercial, very limited. Down here in Honeylands, a package store, this is an area of revenue the town could take advantage of. And again, I'm just saying, open space, if you're not zoned like this, you can't even think about it. I think that's a mistake. So I'm just tossing that out there.
You're making a good case for, for promoting any kind of business development. And any kind of business development comes with its good points, and its bad points. And I just have to bring up just something just to me very, very strange that has just very, very recently happened. We now have a number of solar facilities in town. Okay, and obviously they are revenue-generating entities, and reasonably handsomely so, I feel. We have, within the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah,
5 weeks?
5 and 5.
We have a total of 10 brand-new proposals for solar farms in the town of Rutland. We have to go out, we have to evaluate each one of these. And, just as, for example, with possibly a marijuana cultivator, these solar farms, they generate revenue, but by the same token, who wants one in their backyard? So, certainly, I'd attract any kind of business, but regardless of whether you're talking marijuana, whether you're talking solar, whether you're talking manufacturing, it's not all 100% plus.
Right, it's not invisible.
It just isn't.
Oh, and I had a question for Ron. Solar, is it 20 years that provides income to the town, but the marijuana's 5 years, I think, is that?
I believe that the 20 year is the lifespan of your typical solar development, correct me if I'm wrong on that. So that's where that 20 year comes in, and the 5 year is that's how long a community host agreement is allowed to, by statute, is allowed to last for.
Right.
It can last for less, but the maximum is 5.
By the way, the pilot agreements that we have with the solar companies are for 20 years, but there's almost always a renewable clause for beyond the 20 years.
Just a quick question for the chief. Have you guys done any, what is the research telling you as to what the impacts might be in a town this size?
I don't have any data, but like Peter was just saying, the way the numbers, the only thing I would be concerned about at all out of this is retail establishment. And with the numbers, the way they look is we would only be licensing 1, if that. The town of Leicester, there's a retail establishment opening up there very soon, like very, very soon, before the special town meeting, I believe. So I'll even have time to look into that and see how it goes and see how the opening goes, and hopefully be able to report back during the special town meeting to see if there's any issues with that. But I don't foresee any major quality of life issues changing. If, I don't know, Ron, maybe you can answer this. I know that most of the concern, myself and the public, is retail establishments. What mechanisms are in place to regulate the establishment once it opens up, either through the state or the town, if they're not complying with regulations?
Typically, and I'm not 100% sure if it's in this, but I know in a lot of the towns we've worked with, I do believe there are clauses in here. There are specific nuisance regulations saying that the applicant has to continue to meet certain thresholds of being a good neighbor, essentially, providing queue plans, providing traffic studies, providing all of the materials so that you can get a sense of what they think the actual demand is going to be and what kind of impacts it's going to be to your sidewalks, your roads, etc. As far as town enforcement, really the only thing that can be done is the special permits can be revoked and the license to operate can be revoked. And anything that the town finds to be problematic, they can refer it to the Cannabis Control Commission, and if they get complaints about the businesses, they can revoke the license. And once the license is revoked, that's it. There's nothing they can do. How responsive they're going to be, we don't know, obviously. Usually the way that the marijuana retail establishments are required to operate right now, they're essentially invisible. There's one that just opened up in Worcester that opened up as a medical dispensary, but they set it up with a plan to convert it to a retail establishment, so it's giving us a good sense of what it's going to look like. And it's literally just a frosted glass wall with a very small sign, and I walked by it 5 times before I even realized it was there. Now, what's going to happen when people start queuing up to get in? Because everybody, the way that the regulations are, they have to have an on-site security guard checking IDs, making sure everybody that walks in the door is 21. The regulations have it, so it's not like a liquor store where you can go in with your kid. If you're not 21, you can't set foot in the building. That's just the way they set it up. Is that going to change? I have no idea. But so we don't know how it's going to affect it when people start lining up and trying to get in there. Presumably they've got plans to mitigate this that they're supposed to share with law enforcement and with the town. I would have to check with Leicester and Worcester to find out if that's actually happened. So far, the only town I've worked with that's actually had some applicants, the applicants have not been as ready with that material as we would have liked, so we actually haven't seen. One applicant did actually have a security plan, but he decided not to share it with the planning board, so I never got to look at it. He did share it with the police department, but they hadn't any comments on it at that time, so it's a little hard to say.
And I'm guessing just like a liquor store, the town has the right to send a minor in looking to purchase marijuana.
No, you can't, you have to be 21 just to get through the...
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you can walk up to any counter with a 6-pack of beer. Some of them don't ask for your ID. I'm guessing the town reserves the right to send spies in.
The regulations refer to that as secret shoppers, and they are in the regs.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're very, very strict about it. They have to have somebody on staff. That's their job, is checking the door and making sure that nobody can get in that isn't legally authorized to get in.
Yes.
Scott Leslie, Maple Ave. Maybe I did too much Google research, but going with the federal regulations on money laundering and whatnot for the sale, how does the town deal with the money coming in for that? Do you keep a safe full of cash? You can't put it in the bank? How does the town deal with those funds?
Once it's collected from it's collected from the business, the town would treat it like any other tax revenue. It's the individual businesses that have the limitation that there's only a couple of banks that are willing to do business with them in the state of Massachusetts. I believe one right now, maybe there's another one that's agreed to do it. So they have that problem, but once you start getting tax receipts, then it's just a regular tax receipts. How the federal government is going to view that, if they decide that Massachusetts is going to be the example to the rest of the world for some reason, I'm not sure. That is an open question. The money laundering thing is a big question mark sitting on top of it. I would think that any federal government that wanted to crack down on this would probably pick on California first, but that doesn't mean they're not going to. Yeah. So Massachusetts has a lot of liberals. It may they would have coming here first.
So once the funds come into the town, they're no longer considered money laundering?
Well, they wouldn't. You would be able to use them. Essentially, in that sense, I guess you could say that the town would be essentially laundering them because they would stop being cash payments, and you could take them to the bank the way you would do anything else. Now, because it's legal, from a state standpoint, legal standpoint, that's not considered laundering. What the federal government says, I don't know, because they've been relatively quiet on the issue so far.
But any bank that the town deals with could take that view and decide not to deal with the town and their funds?
I mean, potentially. I'm not sure. I've never heard that issue raised. So far, it's just becomes part of the general fund, and there isn't any distinction between money that comes from that business versus another business. Again, the only thing that I've heard, the only concern I've heard raised is whether or not the federal government is going to consider tax revenues in that light.
We also have Bank Secrecy Act concerns that the banks, non-government entity, may be obligated to report, suspicious funding. If you're bringing in large amount of money that's listed in one of the prohibited areas, but I guess we'll have to wait to see what the test cases are,
Yeah, there's an Elizabeth Warren, she's working on that whole thing, right, so people can actually put their money in a bank to do business. She's working on that, right? You see it on TV.
They may be prohibited, is what I'm getting at. If you say it's from one of these sources, the Bank Secrecy Act prohibited.
Now, so far though, what the sense that I've been getting is that people were a little apprehensive at the beginning of the last couple of years, thinking that if anybody was going to crack down on it, it would probably be Jeff Sessions, and so far, he has not. He's threatened to, but they haven't acted on anything yet. So the thought is generally that if this administration isn't going to crack down on the states, probably nobody will. So the fear is subsiding in that. But again, that doesn't mean it's eliminated. It's really just up to the good graces of the Justice Department at this point, the DEA, that is preventing states from being targeted for this stuff.
Maybe the worst case scenario would be if the Fed stepped in, it'd be like, hey, how much, what you get from taxes from company XYZ that you let come into your town, and where's all that revenue, where's all that tax money? It's like, well, this is what we've got, here's what they paid us last year, and the Feds would be like, give us our money. They're not gonna come and, what are they gonna do, take Rutland away? They're just gonna take the money that we collected in taxes and take it away and say, hey, and close the business. They're not gonna hold Rutland like, hostage. It's like, hey, close the business, give us our tax money. That's it. Right? What are they gonna do? They'll just, they want their money if that happens, which isn't gonna happen.
Lester be our first big test case.
In this region, yeah.
Yeah. They're gonna be the test case.
Well, Worcester's gonna have something open up, no problem with that.
Anyone else? Well, I thank you all for coming. And some very, very good questions, and I hope we have answered everything. I'm sure we have as best we can, and hopefully to your satisfaction. And with that, hope to see you all at town meeting as well. That's the big one. That's what it all comes down to. So, and I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.